Hello again. This video is going to cover the basics of writing your own literacy narrative. I pulled up two docs that you can find on the Blackboard page under Module 1. One is called the Writing a Literacy Narrative Cheat Sheet. That is borrowed from the Norton Field Guide for Writing. This sort of handout is just a great little overview, sort of toolbox kind of, I guess, best way to put it. I guess cheat sheet is the best way to put it. That covers all sorts of things about writing your literacy narrative. So it has things on here about different ways of structuring or organizing your literacy narrative, different sorts of techniques or strategies for describing the setting, thinking about the rhetorical situation, so audience, purpose, genre, stuff like that, help choosing a topic. A short sample literacy narrative is on here. There's also some other literacy narratives posted to the Blackboard page. The other handout is literacy narrative brainstorming and writing strategies. This, again, is also borrowed from Joseph Long-Haney's writing studies blog that I sort of credited right here. But this is another one that should just help you generate a topic as well as actually sort of start writing the literacy narrative. I guess the one thing uniting all literacy narratives throughout the class, or sort of across all students, is going to be a few things. One, it's a narrative. So as you can see from Shannon Nichols' sample here, it's a story, right? The first time I took the 9th grade proficiency test was in March of 8th grade. The test ultimately determines whether students may receive a high school diploma. Moving on. Until that time, I loved writing just as much as I loved math. So a couple things that we can sort of get from this. One, it's first person, right? It's you telling the story using the I. I did this, I did that, I loved writing just as much as I loved math, I was good at it, yada yada yada. So it's first person. Unlike a lot of other essays that you might be used to writing, which take a more detached view, the literacy narrative is much more sort of nitty-gritty, right? Another thing is it's always going to tell a story. It's always going to be based on, your own experiences. So that's another requirement. It has to sort of be focused on some experience that you have with literacy. Now remember that first video lecture that I have that talks about how that literacy can be lots of different things. And this one actually has a lot of different examples of literacies. So you have sports literacies, video game literacies, stuff like that. UC students have their own literacy. Fraternities and sororities have their own literacy. Other clubs on campuses have their own literacies. In a lot of ways, each major has their own literacy that they kind of develop. So think about, what communities you're a part of, both within UC and outside of UC, and then think about what language or what literacy you had to learn in your experience with learning that literacy or that language. And that's really what you're going to want to write about here. So, just to review, one, it's probably definitely going to be in the first person using that I perspective. Two, it's going to focus on your own experience. It's going to be a story or a narrative about something in your life, some past experience, some past, whatever. And third, it's going to focus on one of your literacies that has developed out of a certain kind of community or a certain kind of situation, a certain kind of context, right? So the first thing you're going to want to do maybe is think about, okay, what kind of literacy am I looking at? Am I looking at literacy in that, classic sense of learning how to read or learning how to write? Am I looking at literacy in a different kind of way, as in, joining a certain kind of community or a certain group and then gaining that literacy? Maybe the literacy is based off a certain activity, like playing video games, or, for example, maybe you're involved in some, making websites, or something like that, making YouTube videos or some other kind of web-based creative project. Like that also involves its own kind of literacy, like being a part of sort of the community of YouTube video bloggers, as it were, YouTube video makers. Like, that has its own kind of literacy involved in it. So just think about what kind of communities you're involved in and what kind of language or literacy is involved in that community. A couple other things that you're going to want to think about are listed here. Just some brainstorming questions, things like that. Some other things I have in here to kind of help you along are the key features of literacy narratives. Well, I already mentioned some of these. Well-told story, vivid detail. So make sure, like looking at the David Sedaris example that I posted, or even this sample up here. She spends more time, this author, Nicole, or Shannon Nichols, rather, I don't know why I call her Nicole. But anyway, she spends some time talking about, her emotional reaction, how she felt about things. So it's not just a dry retelling of the events, but it's more stylized, if that makes any sense. It's more detailed. It's more focused on sensory details, emotional details, things like that. So you're sort of, in some ways, the literacy narrative's a balancing job. Like, on the one hand, you have to give me information, right? Information about how you gained a certain kind of literacy, how that literacy developed out of a community, etc., etc. On the other hand, you have to dress that information up with great details, with, good descriptors, good little things like that. Also, make sure you tell me, why this matters so much. So, for example, maybe gaining this literacy through, whatever experience has kind of changed the way you look at the world, right? So maybe going through, maybe you volunteered at a soup kitchen, right? And after kind of gaining the literacy that comes with being in that environment, maybe it changed the way that you looked at something. Maybe it has some sort of significance to you. Maybe gaining literacy allowed you to do something that you previously couldn't do, right? So tell me, don't only tell me like how you gained that literacy, but tell me why gaining that literacy was important to you at all. Other little things that you may want to think about are, again, organizing. There's different ways of organizing the literacy narrative that you need to be aware of. There's not really, the way you organize is going to be up to you, but I sort of showed you a few different ways of organizing it on the cheat sheet. Also, keep in mind that if you wanted to, you don't even have to write a paper for this. You can do what's called a multimodal literacy narrative. I'm going to pull up the assignment sheet real quick to show you. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So here we go. Feel free to incorporate pictures or artifacts, so it doesn't have to be just text, right? You can also, where did I say that? Here we go. Work in an alternate mode, blog entry, performance, YouTube video, PowerPoint. I've had people do music videos. I've had people do comics, all sorts of different things. Now, if you do that, you have to get my approval. So tell me, hey, I want to do my literacy narrative in comic form or whatever. And I'll probably use some tips, some hints, some, not necessarily requirements, but just like, think about these things, etc., etc. And also you have to write a short 1 to 2 page rationale telling me why you decided not to do a paper, but instead you decided to do a YouTube video or a comic or a music video. Excuse me. Or what have you. But remember, just, you don't have to write a paper. You can do something else. You can work in a different mode if you choose. I'll have a video about doing multimodal projects on the Blackboard page if you want to take a look at it. But if you were to do a multimodal project, make sure you conference with me, because that one-on-one time will definitely help you avoid problems if you choose to do a multimodal project. Other than that, if you have any questions about the literacy narrative or writing the essay or anything like that, feel free to conference with me. Ask me any questions, do whatever you need to do, post on the discussion board page, or do whatever you need to do to find out the answer to your question. Other than that, enjoy writing the narrative. I will talk to you all later.